I cannot thank you enough for the love you have shown our whole family.
Allegations of a royal earthquake are rocking the UK. Insiders hint that Princess Anne might have taken the ultimate step against Queen Camilla. Could this be the most explosive chapter in modern monarchy? You won't believe what's being said. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single twist. The whispers began almost instantly. Inside the ornate walls of Buckingham Palace, where tradition usually shields every secret, word began to leak of something that no one had ever expected. Reports suggested that an ordinary royal meeting had turned into an extraordinary confrontation, and at the center of it, Princess Anne and Queen Camilla. Those close to palace life spoke carefully, always using phrases like, "It's being said," or "some claim." But the story they painted was hard to ignore. A gathering, meant to be calm and procedural, had allegedly turned tense. Sharp words were exchanged, emotions spilled over, and in the end, Camilla was said to have walked away, visibly shaken, with aides rushing after her. But here's the thing. In the royal world, events rarely happen in isolation. If this story was true, it wasn't the result of a single afternoon gone wrong. This was the spark on a fire that had been smoldering for years. The question was, what had been fueling it all this time? And why had it ignited now? To understand the weight of this moment, you have to look at the two women at the heart of it. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach, her discipline, and her unwavering loyalty to the traditions of the crown. She's the kind of royal who never chased the spotlight but earned respect through decades of service. She stood beside her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, through countless challenges, representing a style of monarchy built on restraint and duty. Camilla's journey couldn't have been more different. She stepped into the royal sphere as an outsider, slowly making her way into the public's acceptance. Over time, she took on royal responsibilities, supported causes, and built a softer, more approachable image, yet her rise was always shadowed by controversy. While the public saw polite smiles and formal greetings between the two, insiders spoke of something colder beneath the surface. Brief interactions marked by cool tones, charity events where their conversations seemed deliberately short, and a feeling that each woman's presence put the other on edge. Some say the tension went back decades, tied not just to the institution but to personal history. But what's certain is that the divide between them wasn't about a single disagreement. It was a clash between two entirely different visions of what the monarchy should stand for. And eventually, those visions collided. It was late afternoon when the key figures entered the East drawing room. The chandeliers glowed, portraits of past monarchs looked down, and the air carried a stillness that felt heavier than usual. Camilla arrived first, her expression calm but unreadable. Moments later, Anne entered, alone, posture straight, gaze unwavering. King Charles was already there, positioned near the window, looking uneasy. The meeting began with discussions about ceremonial roles, charitable responsibilities, and the distribution of certain patronages. At first, it was civil, if tense, but as topics shifted toward Camilla's growing influence in palace matters, the tone began to change. According to those familiar with the events, Anne's voice, usually measured, grew sharper. She questioned decisions, raised concerns about tradition being overlooked, and made it clear she wasn't prepared to accept certain changes. Camilla pushed back, insisting she had acted with loyalty and respect for the crown. And then came the moment that shifted the entire room. Anne's words cut through the formality, strong, personal, and impossible to ignore. Camilla, caught between defending herself and maintaining composure, faltered. Her cheeks flushed, her hands tightened on the arm of her chair. King Charles tried to restore calm, but the exchange had crossed a line. In the end, Camilla stood, said nothing more, and left the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence that followed. The next morning, the mood inside Buckingham Palace had changed entirely. While others hesitated, unsure of how to proceed after the confrontation, Anne moved with quiet determination. Witnesses described her walking the palace corridors with purpose, her navy coat immaculate, her expression unreadable. She reached the Queen's private apartments, spoke to security, and gave an instruction that few expected. Camilla's belongings were to be removed immediately. Some staff members hesitated. After all, Anne did not officially hold authority over such matters, but her tone left no room for doubt. "Do not wait for approval. The crown must reclaim its dignity," she reportedly said. Within hours, Camilla's personal effects, clothing, photographs, and keepsakes were being carefully packed away. It was a quiet process, but those who saw it understood the weight of what was happening. Outside, the press caught wind of the shift. Headlines speculated about a palace power change, and the public began to take notice. Social media lit up with divided opinions. Supporters of Anne praised her as the last true protector of royal tradition. Others questioned whether she had overstepped. But one thing was clear: Anne's influence inside the palace had just reached a new level. Meanwhile, Camilla withdrew from the public eye. Instead of staying in London or at other royal residences, she retreated to her private estate in the countryside. The once busy calendar of royal engagements fell silent for her. In the quiet of her estate, she was said to have spent hours reflecting, speaking only to her closest aides and family members. But this wasn't simply retreat, it may have been regrouping. Reports suggested she began hosting private gatherings with certain extended royal family members. The guest list was selective, avoiding those known to be close to Anne, and instead reaching out to figures who might feel overlooked or uncertain in this new dynamic. In these private conversations, Camilla allegedly shared her side of the story: her commitment to the king, her record of service, and her belief that the monarchy should embrace unity, not division. Whether these meetings were meant to rally support or simply seek comfort, no one could say for sure. But one thing was certain: Camilla was not ready to fade quietly from the royal stage. Perhaps the most puzzling part of all this was King Charles' reaction, or rather, his lack of one. Days passed without any public statement from him. No appearances, no interviews, no comment on the growing speculation. Reports suggested he might have been at Balmoral, the royal estate in Scotland, far from the bustle of London and the glare of cameras. In the meantime, Camilla reportedly sent him several handwritten letters. The first was deeply personal, recalling their shared history, the challenges they had faced together, and her need for his support now. Another letter was more formal, outlining her contributions to the crown and asking for at least a meeting. But according to sources, each letter went unanswered. This silence fueled endless speculation. Was the king avoiding the conflict to prevent taking sides? Or had he already made up his mind but chosen not to say it out loud? Royal commentators were divided. Some called it strategic patience, others saw it as indecision. Whatever the reason, the longer the king stayed quiet, the more the public began to form their own conclusions. Outside the palace gates, the story was no longer just a royal headline. It had become a full-blown public debate. On social media, posts poured in by the thousands within hours of the first whispers. Twitter feeds, Instagram stories, and TikTok edits told two very different versions of the same royal drama. One side proudly wore the banner of #Team Annie, praising the Princess Royal as the unwavering guardian of tradition. Supporters called her the steel spine of the crown and the last royal who puts duty above personal comfort. Posts showed clips of her at official events, military parades, charity openings, state visits, always poised, always purposeful. The message was clear. Here was a royal who had earned her place through decades of service. The other side rallied under Stand with Camilla, portraying her as a woman who had endured years of skepticism only to face the ultimate humiliation. Many pointed out the causes she championed, her work with charities, and the visible ease she brought to public engagements. For these supporters, Camilla wasn't a threat to tradition. She was a sign the monarchy could adapt without losing its identity. Television networks quickly adjusted their schedules. Morning shows hosted special panels with royal commentators, historians, and body language experts who dissected every frame of footage from recent months. Was that glance from Anne a warning sign? Did Charles' posture at events suggest tension between his wife and his sister? Even late-night hosts couldn't resist weighing in, adding humor to a story that was anything but funny inside palace walls. But their jokes were often followed by serious questions. Questions about leadership, loyalty, and what it means to represent the crown in the modern era. In cities across the UK, coffee shop conversations drifted toward the topic. Office break rooms buzzed with theories. Even those who usually didn't follow royal news found themselves drawn into the discussion. Outside Buckingham Palace, the scene was striking. Tourists and locals gathered in small groups, snapping photos of the gates as if expecting a sudden appearance. Some held handmade signs. Anne is our queen in spirit, and Camilla deserves respect. Others simply stood in silence, watching the building that had once symbolized unity now stand as the backdrop to division. Internationally, the story took on a life of its own. News outlets in Australia, Canada, and beyond covered it with the same urgency as local political news. In Commonwealth nations, debates unfolded about whether this was a sign of the monarchy's resilience or its fragility. What made the reaction even more intense was the sense that this wasn't just about two individuals. For many, it symbolized a bigger struggle between preserving long-held traditions and embracing a softer, more adaptable approach to royal duty. That's why people weren't just watching this story. They were emotionally invested in how it ended. While the public's emotions ran high, inside the palace, the atmosphere was far more calculated and tense. Reports began to surface that senior courtiers and advisors were holding discreet meetings in side rooms, reviewing not just the events of that dramatic afternoon, but the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved. The whispers were cautious, but they carried weight. There could be changes coming to the royal structure itself. In practical terms, that meant examining who oversaw certain charities, who represented the crown at official functions, and which family members had access to specific privileges. Even long-standing arrangements that had been set in place during Queen Elizabeth II's reign were said to be on the table for discussion. It was unusual, but not entirely without precedent. Royal historians reminded the press that after periods of public controversy, the monarchy had sometimes used the moment to quietly adjust its internal hierarchy. But this time, the changes, if they came, would be unfolding under a much brighter and more relentless spotlight. For staff working inside the palace, the tension was palpable. Some described walking through hallways where conversations dropped to a whisper the moment someone passed by. Others admitted they were taking extra care not to appear aligned with either Anne or Camilla, fearing that any perceived loyalty could affect their positions. Behind closed doors, there were reportedly two schools of thought. One side believed the monarchy needed to present a strong, united front, meaning Camilla's role should be restored as quickly and smoothly as possible. The other believed that Anne's decisive actions had resonated with the public and should be supported, even if that meant Camilla's role was reduced or redefined. Adding to the complexity was the king's continued silence. Without a clear statement from Charles, even senior advisors were unsure how far they could go in making decisions. Some speculated that this pause was deliberate, a chance to assess the mood of the nation before committing to any move. Others feared it was simply indecision, which could leave the monarchy vulnerable to further public division. Meanwhile, media crews stationed outside royal residences speculated daily on what might happen next. Would Camilla return to public duties? Would Anne be given more formal authority within the institution? Could there even be a formal reshuffling of titles or responsibilities? Royal watchers knew that any one of those changes would send a signal, not just to the British public, but to the world, about where the monarchy's priorities truly lay. Was it willing to adapt to modern expectations, or would it double down on the traditions that had defined it for centuries? And so, the Palace Review continued quietly, every discussion and document hidden away from public view. But for those inside and outside the royal walls, the sense was the same. Something significant was shifting. The question wasn't whether change was coming, it was how far it would go, and who would be standing at the center when the dust finally settled. So here we are, facing a royal situation that seems to raise more questions than answers. Two strong women, each with their own vision for the monarchy, have reached a point where their differences could no longer stay hidden. A king caught in the middle, his silence speaking as loudly as any statement, and a public that has chosen sides, adding even more pressure to an already delicate moment. What happens next could shape the monarchy for years to come. Will Anne's firm hand be remembered as the move that protected the crown, or as a step too far? Will Camilla find a way back into the heart of the royal family, or will she continue her life in quiet separation? And perhaps the biggest question, when the king finally speaks, whose side will he stand on? I want to hear what you think. Should the monarchy stick to tradition at all costs, or is there room for adaptation and new perspectives? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're ready for more royal revelations, check out our next video where we uncover another hidden chapter from behind palace walls.